Welcome to Landmarks, the podcast where we explore the journey of living for God. In today's episode, we sit down with Brother Carlos and Sister Heather Andrews from Faith Mountain Pentecostal Church in Lakeside, California. Brother and Sister Andrews share how their journey has been marked by the undeniable faithfulness of God, and how they've experienced God as wonderful, their counselor, their everlasting Father, and their Prince of Peace. Well, praise the Lord, everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of the Landmarks podcast. We're excited to be back on the air, recording again, and today we have our very first episode with more than one guest. We have a very awesome couple from our local church, good friends, Sister Heather, Brother Carlos Andrews and Sister Heather Andrews are both here with us in the studio.
Hey.
Hello.
Yes, and this is cool because this is our first episode with 3 people here in the studio, and I had reached out to Brother Carlos and Sister Heather in hopes that they would agree to come onto the podcast, and they did, and I'm thankful that they did. I know that a lot of people tune in, and we just pray that you are blessed by this podcast, and we're just going to chat today. We're just going to have a good talk and talk about the goodness of God and really what God has done in their lives, emphasizing different landmarks. And for the most part, we're just going to turn it on over to you guys, and you guys kind of work through the agenda. I know you guys put something together, and no pressure. Let's just talk. So go ahead, and the stage is your guys's. Yeah.
All right. Well, we just wanted to start off and tell you what a blessing that Landmarks has been to us. My husband and I, Carlos, right away when the podcast comes out, I hear him over there listening. I'm like, oh, a podcast must have came out. And then he'll listen twice, because he'll listen by himself and then he'll listen again with me. And just hearing the testimonies from the church, the landmarks that others have had, has been a blessing. Like, we've been in the park before listening with the podcast, walking around Mass Park, crying.
Oh, that's awesome.
And just
inspirational.
replaying it, calling my family saying, you have to listen to this story.
Oh, that's awesome.
It really
Increasing our
is.
faith.
You know, it's really cool being able to connect with the different ones in our local church. Because, it's one thing to see them and greet them every Sunday, Tuesday, and different fellowships we have, but when you get to sit down with them and them just kind of confidently share their story, it really, for me, it's been really something that has been binding us closer, as a body. And
after
I think
you
that's
hear their
huge.
story, you feel like, oh my goodness, we're closer. I mean, they're on a podcast, but you're hearing it.
And it makes sense now when Sister so-and-so is praising the way she is, or Brother so-and-so. And that's, honestly, it's been a blessing to me, and thank you guys for tuning in.
Because sometimes you don't have time to hear the whole story, like talking to them after church.
Right.
But then, listening to the podcast, you get to hear their whole testimony.
Yeah, it's really been a pleasure to be able to kind of facilitate this,
Yeah. And just the idea of landmarks, because you can say your testimony and you have your own testimony, that the landmarks in your life, and then you go through something and you have to look back and remember, oh my goodness,
right.
God has already helped me in this area.
Yes.
This is a testimony I have. And then even if you haven't went through something, you heard the testimony of someone in church, and God did it for them, and I'm believing God can do it for me. And so just the idea of this kind of podcast has been a blessing to us. And the fact that you asked us to come on to share our stories is a blessing.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And I'm glad you guys agreed to it.
Yeah. So when we were thinking about what to share, so many landmarks have come to mind. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, there's no way we're going to have enough time to sit down and tell them. Because when we had the Chinese exchange students come and stay at our house, God was new to them. They had never seen a Bible. So when they came in, they were picking up a Bible and all gathered around like, what's this?
Yeah.
And we told them about it. We started talking about God and just telling, and that sitting, I mean, when I was thinking about it, I was remembering that took hours. We were at the table for hours.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, okay, we got a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Lord, what's kind of the highlights in Isaiah 9:6 came to mind.
Sure.
And that one's, you guys all know it, but it's, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. The government shall be upon his shoulder. His name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And the reason that came to mind is sometimes when I'm praying, I think of that verse and I just start worshiping God for each of those names.
Yeah.
And so in that worship, I'm thinking of testimonies, and I thought, well, maybe we'll just go that route and we'll just share some of those things.
Yeah.
Like how God has been wonderful, how God has been.
Right. Yeah.
And so I asked Carlos, and he agreed that that's, as long as it's okay with Brother Michael.
Hey, that's totally fine. I had my little outline, and you guys presented that, and I thought, oh, perfect. Because I had never done a 3-person podcast.
Yeah. And the only reason why the outline was a little scary for me, because I thought, oh, maybe if someone was a little more professional and had more advice to give.
Right.
And I thought, well, we're not like experts or anything, but we do have testimonies. And in the testimony, we have advice, that we
lessons learned.
Yeah.
And that's exactly
lessons learned for sure.
Landmark moments. Yeah.
Yeah. And awesome. So one of the things, so he shall be called Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Just that is actually the first thing for me that I learned seemed like, as a childhood, God is wonderful, because what I'm learning at church, I'm finding him to be that wonderful that I'm learning about in my own personal life.
Uh-huh.
And one of my first testimonies was about how God opened my understanding to be able to read, because I know a lot of people have heard this testimony already, but I tell it all the time. But I couldn't read in elementary school. I remember being in 6th grade and being pulled to the back of the class with a resource teacher.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't read what the other students were reading. She had to read it to me. And then she would ask me the same questions they were getting, but I didn't have to read it. She could just read it, and then I would answer verbally.
Uh-huh. And
even with the story being read to me, I couldn't answer the questions very well. Like, my comprehension of the story wasn't there. And that was in 6th grade. And I remember just feeling so like so dumb. I hate to say that, but that's how I felt.
Yeah.
But I had a heart for God. I would go to school and not understand anything, but I'd go to church and understand a little bit.
Sure. From
Sunday school or the preaching. And beyond the understanding, my heart was connecting with what they were saying. Like, I had a hunger for it with the heart, even though my comprehension may not have been completely there. But I had a couple things going on. My parents had divorced. So school wasn't a big deal because that was dramatic kind of thing. Dyslexia, some other things. And so one of my Sunday school teachers had this chart on the wall and said, we're going to read through the book of Matthew and this year. And I was thinking, oh yeah, I want to read through the book of Matthew. I can't read, but I'm thinking I want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
And I remember he put the bookmarker in my Bible because I didn't even know where the book of Matthew was. Wow. And then I go home. I can't read the book of Matthew. I can't read. And so I shut my door and I was on the carpet praying and crying over my Bible because I couldn't read it, but I wanted to. And crying and saying, God, I don't understand anything. This is in 6th grade. I don't understand anything, but help me at least to understand your word. Yeah. And just having that hunger. And I opened my Bible and it was in Matthew. So it started out with the genealogy, like something that people would just skip over. But I'm looking at it and I could understand it. So I'm getting excited. I'm like, wow, okay, I recognize Abraham. I remember that story from Sunday school. And I started recognizing the names and realizing, oh, this person had this person. And I got so excited about it. And I just kept reading.
Started coming to light.
It did. Yeah. It turned on a light bulb and I just kept reading and I got a highlighter and I just started highlighting everything I could understand. And so if I showed you that Bible, it's like, oh my gosh, you highlighted the whole book of Matthew because,
that's funny.
Because I was just so excited I could understand what it was saying. And I ran downstairs and I showed my mom, I know what this is saying. I know what it's about. I started telling her everything I was reading in the Bible. And it was such a, like, she saw, wow, this is really amazing. And she went and she unplugged. We had like this processor where you could type and then you could push print and it would print right away. And she went and unplugged it in my room and said, now that God has opened your ears, our understanding to read I want you to write. And I didn't write anything really, but at that time, but I remember being excited about the genealogy. I started thinking, I just want to put from Abraham to Jesus on top of my walls, like, on the ceiling of my walls. Cause I understand that it was incredible to me that you could see from Abraham to Jesus at that time. That was just so incredible.
Huge.
So God is wonderful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And another thing about crying into the carpet, at that time, I had been praying for my mom. And since my parents had split up, she hadn't went to church, and I would go to revival. I mean, I would go to church all the time, but I would go to church and God would be moving in such a powerful way. And I would go to the back of the church where there was a sound booth and there was like these tall stairs, and I would go up there and call her from the phone, the landline in the church, and say, Mom, we're having an awesome service. You should come, thinking as a little girl that if she just stepped in this building, God's going to fill her with the Holy Ghost.
Right.
And so she would be like, Heather, I'm already in my pajamas. I'm not going to go, and just crying, hanging up the phone with her, then just, praying for my mom right there in the stairwell. And couldn't get her to come to church, but God's wonderful. I remember being in my room and crying over her like I cried over my Bible to understand it. I would cry for my mom and pray for her. And one of those days, I had a dream that my mom and I were traveling on a road and people were going different directions, and we saw a light at the end of the road, and I'm trying to get her to stay on this road, and she sees people going the other way. She goes, Heather, let's go this way. I said, no. We got to stay on this road. This is the one that we got to stay on. And so eventually, as we got closer and closer to the light, I stopped having to pull her, because in the beginning I was pulling her, and I stopped having to pull her, and she let go of my hand and she started walking with me. We're both walking to the light. And even though now we're hardly anybody's on the road anymore. Everyone has already turned off on the side, and we're still walking on the straight and narrow. And, and eventually we both start running, and I'm not holding her hand. She's running on her own. And I woke up, and it seems like such a simple dream, but it was, as a child, that was hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was hope to me.
It was a God dream.
Yeah, it was a God.
Totally.
It was. I believe it was from God. And so anyways, I held on to that dream and just believing, my mom's going to be saved. And but I couldn't get her to go to church. And I remember being at youth convention one year, and the burden came on really heavy on me. People were worshiping, youth convention's a time of when everyone's dancing all over the place.
Yeah, yeah.
And at youth conventions we went to, people were dancing on the platform, and it was fun. And but I was weeping on the side and crying for my mom. And this lady who didn't know me, she came up to me and she said, right now you're at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, and every tear you cry is going directly towards Jesus's feet, and he's going to answer your prayer tonight. For her to say tonight, it better happen, right?
Right.
And when she said you're at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, I didn't know what that was. Wailing Wall, I'm thinking a whale, like a water whale. I didn't know what the Wailing Wall was. Later on, I learned, that in Jerusalem there's one wall and people put their prayers in the cracks.
Right.
And I didn't know that, but I learned it later when she wrote a letter, because she wanted to make sure that I understood what she had seen. So she sent me a letter and introduced herself. She said, hi, I'm Megan Roberts. I haven't heard from her since. And I tried to look her up on Facebook to see if I can say, hey, God answered that prayer. But I haven't found her. So if anybody who listens to the podcast knows Megan Roberts, or somebody who used to be named that, I would just love to get a hold of her.
That'd be really cool. That would be really cool.
It would be. It would be so cool if somebody could point me in her direction.
Wow.
So she didn't even know that this came to pass. Like she just spoke in my ear. I never even saw her. I think I saw her face after church. She came and introduced herself, and it was all just like, I don't know, I'm young, so she so when she said that, though, the burden I was carrying, I mean, I felt like I was dying, but it lifted. And I felt so much joy. My tears instantly stopped. It was like the burden lifted. I knew God was going to answer it.
Yeah.
And so I go back to my seat and we have the service. And that night we danced and we worshiped. I think I danced for like an hour. And then afterwards I'm exhausted. So I'm sitting in the chair up in the front. And a lot of people are always already going to dinner and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And we're staying at the youth convention center. So it didn't matter how long we stayed. We could just go up in the room and go to bed.
You were already home.
Yeah. And so a friend of mine ran up and she goes, Heather, did you know your mom is here? And I'm like, no, what? And she goes, yeah, look up there in the balcony. And I turned around. Sure enough, she was up there in the balcony and she's waving at me. And I run up there and I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? Why are you here? And she said, I don't know. Susan just wanted somebody to come to this. She said there's this convention. She wanted someone to drive with her. She didn't want to drive alone. And I was thinking, Susan Johnson, like they weren't barely friends, just like so random. So my mom did go to church. After that, she got in. My stepdad got in. He got baptized. They were so involved in their church. But in time, they started having marriage issues and stopped going to church. Mm-hmm. Eventually, in that time of not going to church, my mom, and I had called her. I told her, Mom, I'm going to tell a testimony. Is it okay for me to share this? So I speak highly of my mom. Today, she's serving the Lord. She's an amazing witness. She witnesses to people in the park, in the school, in the store. She's talking to the cashier lady.
That's awesome.
She's just, very loving and loves the Lord. And, but at this time in her life, she had backslid again. And this time she was partying and she was the life of the party. My sister and I, we were in church and we would come home from church and she'd have a big party going on in her house. I mean, even backsliders were at her house. Wow. And backsliders our age were partying with our mom. And and she was bringing home, people from work. And really, she was the funnest. I think she was the funnest person. It seemed to be that way when we got home and we saw how things were going. She was the funnest person in the party. They all wanted to be around her. Mm-hmm. She would go to Las Vegas and she'd come back with wardrobes of clothes. Just people were buying her stuff and it looked like she was having a good time. And we were praying all this time, like, God, bring her back to church. But in our mind, we're thinking, but she looks like she's having so much fun. It's hard to really imagine her coming back to church when it looks like
things seem to be going great.
Good. She's got all this money.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in the car and just praying. And one time when there was a party going on in our house, sitting in our car in front of the house, and me and Stephanie praying, God, whatever it takes, even if it's a car wreck and we're crying, we're like, God, if we need to die, just let our mom get back in church. Mm-hmm. We're praying whatever it takes kind of thing. Yeah, yeah. And thankfully it didn't take that. But then we go in there and, a couple after that prayer of whatever it takes, it's still a while, months of her having a good time kind of thing. And I remember I was going to school in Fresno and was traveling home to go to a service. I was praying for my mom and I was going to be late for church, but trying to get there. And I felt like God said, if there's a testimony, or stand up and testify about your dream. And I was like, that's so strange because one, we don't have testimony services, right? Like who even can testify now? Like we don't have testimony services. And at that time at our church, we didn't even have that Thanksgiving time. Oh, wow. So I was like, testify. one, we don't even have testimony services, so I doubt they're going to ask for a testimony. And two, that's a strange thing, like to stand up and testify about a dream. It's not even happening.
Right.
My mom's having fun, and I'm going to stand up. I'm going to look like a child, like so childish. I'm in college, and I'm thinking I'm going to stand up and testify that I had a dream one time. And it felt silly. But I was like, okay, if they ask for a testimony, I'll stand up and I'll testify about my dream.
Yeah.
And so I get to church and I'm late because just the drive of coming from Fresno. And my pastor, Pastor Dimian, before he got up, when he got up and before he preached, he goes, I'm just kind of feeling like someone has a fiery testimony. He never does this. Never.
Wow.
And he says, I just feel like somebody has a fiery testimony. Can someone stand up real quick and tell us the testimony? And I stood up real quick because I'm like, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. So they run the mic down to me. And at this time, I mean, I'm telling stories now to people, but at that time, I'm like quiet person.
Right.
And I'm so embarrassed
that
they brought a mic down to me and that I have to testify about a dream. So I was like, well, it's funny that you asked for a testimony because I was driving here and I felt like I needed to testify about a dream I had. And I told them my mom's not in church, but I had a dream that one day she would be, and I told my dream.
Yeah.
And after service, the pastor met me in the parking lot and he said, we're going to believe that God is going to turn this whole situation around. And within a week, God turned it all around. It sounds like I'm making it up, just how crazy it is, but it is true.
Wow.
I'm going to tell my mom to listen because she's all part of this, and she knows. Within a week, we got a phone call that she was in the hospital because she was having a mental breakdown. She had been partying at this big house with doctors, with football players. And these people, when they planned the party out, they said, the guy that invited her to the party said, there's going to be some other girls there. And when she showed up, it was just like 5 men. And she was like, where's the girls? And they just kind of laughed at each other. And she was starting to get nervous, like, why, what's going on here? And one of the guys went outside in the backyard and she went out there to say, where's the other girls? And he goes, you know what? I really like you, but I'm just letting you know these guys have plans for you or big plans for you or something like that. And she was like, what in the world? So then she starts panicking, like, I'm going to get out of here. Yeah. So she starts running. She doesn't even grab her purse because her purse was in one of the guys' cars. She just runs out and starts knocking on doors. It's 1 a.m, but she's trying to find some place. She doesn't have her phone. Right. She can't call the cops.
Random neighborhood.
Yeah. And so she's knocking on all these doors and they're taunting her, the guys. And someone had called one of the other houses that she had knocked on called the police. So she's running around out there and the police come and pick her up and take her to the hospital. And when we got to the hospital, she opened up about a lot of stuff that we didn't know what was going on. And it was a lot bigger than what we knew. I mean, to us, it just looked like the life of the party. Everything's great. Right. But we didn't know a lot of things. And sadly, there's some sad stuff that happened with that. But in that situation, so she was afraid to come home because she was like, it's not going to be safe for my family. Come home. But we were able to talk her into going to rehab. And in that time of when she went to rehab, we couldn't speak to her for a while. I can't remember how long it was. But finally, we were able to talk to her on the phone. And as soon as we got her on the phone, we're like, Mom, as soon as we can visit with you, let's go to church. Yeah. And so she said, okay. And so all 4 of us kids went up there. I think all 4 of us, for sure 3 of us, went to church in Turlock. And that service was a landmark. It was life-changing because at that time, even my brother wasn't he was running away from the call of God on his life.
Yeah.
And just, but at that service, he got refilled. My mom got refilled.
Wow.
Today, my brother's pastoring in Texas, and his life was changed in that service. It was just,
That's really
I don't
cool.
know how much time I'm probably going over.
No, that's fine. We're just talking.
Okay.
There's no rush. I mean, Brother Carlos, anytime you want to chime in and
It's hard to chime in
jump
on
in.
that because that was before we met.
Sure,
but,
sure. So let's fast forward real quick just to the point
Together.
where you guys
actually the next testimonies are together.
Sure. All right.
He was going to talk about wonderful on his own too before he met.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Before he met me as his wonderful, he learned God was wonderful.
Yeah, awesome. There you go.
So I think I grew up in Pentecost, I think since I was 2, from my mom. So my mom's a landmark story in itself because she was born in El Salvador, born and raised Catholic. And then before coming to America, she became apostolic and was introduced to Pentecost when she came to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But we were heavily involved in church just as young children from, we used to live off of like North Mollison. I think only had one car. Certain times we would either get dropped off for church or walk from North Mollison to Peach when we were going to New Life Center at the time. But we would go to, because my mom was bilingual, she would help in the Spanish service. So we had service from 10:12, Spanish service from like 1 or 1:30 to 3. And then we would, I think, stay at the church, have a break, and go to
Sunday night.
And my mom was in choir at like 4:45, I think 4:45 or 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then we would have service at 6.
So you guys were all day.
And then we would have, I think, Bible study Wednesday or Thursday night. And then on Fridays during break, during like spring break or winter break or summer, we would walk to the church and on Fridays and then have like an hour of prayer and then clean the church.
Yeah. So you guys were pretty heavily involved.
We were heavily involved. My dad grew up Baptist, didn't fully attend church, but he would come when we have like special events. So like Father's Day, Mother's Day,
Sure.
Christmas and Easter. And he was respectful and came. Coming to Faith Mountain, I loved when we had sectional events. I loved the zeal, passion, consecration, and holiness that Faith Mountain had.
Yeah.
My dad taught me what I learned from my dad. He did taught me hard work hard for your family, provide for your family, and spend time with your children when you're not working.
Yeah.
My mom taught me at a very young age, like before we would go to school, that taught us how to pray, at least starting at like from like 5 to 10 to 15 minutes as young children to pray before we would walk to school, read our Bible daily, be faithful to church. And as we got older and started working or having side jobs, teach us to pray, pay our tithes and offering. And then also as we got older and teenagers, teaching us what to look for in dating or a future wife, and teaching us to be the spiritual leader in our family.
That's awesome.
Some people in my church that impacted me were my Sunday school. So a Sunday school couple in my church, they were my Sunday school teachers. They taught children's church, kids power hour, but also they were my Bible quizzers. So that was one of the things that same interest that me and Heather had as we started dating. Yeah. And then also one of my old
you mean you guys both did Bible quizzing
yes,
yourselves?
We did.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
We both awesome. Did Bible quizzing. I did it in high school, I think. Sophomore year to
tougher divisions.
I started in sophomore year to maybe senior year.
Nice.
And then one of my other Sunday school teachers, I think he was like I think junior high Sixth grade.
Was it that teacher that introduced you to Odyssey?
That was a different Sunday school teacher. Yeah. But yeah, it was a different family that introduced me to
Shout
Adventures
out to
in
Sunday
Odyssey.
school teachers.
Yeah.
All these things.
To Adventures in Odyssey, because we would also go to
That was something we had in common.
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, we would go to junior camp and listen to Adventures in Odyssey on tape.
Yeah.
One other Sunday school teacher, he's the one that taught me how to run this soundboard in church. He was a sound man, and I think had conflicts on Sunday morning. So eventually, as I was like, I think junior, senior, high school, eventually
you took over.
Taught me how to run this soundboard and do media.
Nice.
Yeah.
So moving to counsel, how God has been our counselor. That's our dating. I thought about, that counselor, when has God been counselor? That was in our dating and marriage.
Dating stages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
so when did you guys meet?
Oh,
when did you two meet? Like,
go ahead, babe.
What was like the year?
Yeah.
Let's touch on like when you guys met and
so,
just how long you guys been married, and then we'll carry on into it.
So first time actually meeting was 2003 senior camp. I had just graduated from high school. That same week I had turned 18, and we met like on the last night.
Oh wow.
Just she was hanging out with friends, and then I was hanging out with two other guys, and we were just being goofy. And then I think that's how we met the first time.
Yeah, they were. Me and my friends, we were taking pictures, going around. It was the last night, so we would make sure that we had enough pictures to go home with. And then here comes these three guys that were popping in our pictures and wanting to take pictures with us. We didn't know them, but they were being silly, and so we're like,
photobombing them.
Yeah, photobombing.
Yeah.
And they started making suggestions. Oh, let's go here. Come on, let's go take a picture like this. Let's go over here. And so we went. We just went along with it, taking pictures with these guys we didn't know. And anyway, that's what we met.
That's senior camp.
That was the first time.
That's funny.
After that, we actually both got busy with schooling. I started schooling in fall of 2003, and then I finished in 2006 and got a full-time job. Then around 2008, youth convention.
So 5 years later.
5 years later.
Mm-hmm. After the first encounter?
Yeah.
After the first encounter, saw each other again on the last night of youth convention.
Yeah.
And then I think a few months later after that is when.
Well, so on the night that we met each other at youth convention, there was like a battle of the bands after service, and I was super tired, but decided to go. And I was there with my monster trying to stay awake, and I was getting tired. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go in the room. And I was walking out the door, and as I was walking out, he was walking in, and I remembered him. And when I saw him, I remembered his name right away, Carlos. And then I was like, wait a minute, what am I wearing? Like, do I really want to say hi to somebody? And because if I'm wearing, I don't know, it depends on what I'm wearing, whether I want to get any conversation going.
Sure.
But it was so funny that night, my friend, so I used to wear my hair in buns. I mean, nowadays buns are in style and big sweaters are in style, but in that day it wasn't. And I would.
That's what you would wear.
Yeah, and I would just be the unstyled person, Yeah. And my friends, I remember, she said, Heather, it's the last night of youth convention. Can I do your hair? I'm like, okay. And then after she did my hair, can you wear my clothes? And I'm like, what? and all the girls got together. They were all excited and giddy about me going outside with my hair done and wearing my friend's clothes.
Sure.
And I know that sounds funny to you guys, but anyways, they were all kind of like, oh, we're dressing Heather up. And I remember being afraid to step out in the hallway, like just to even go to service, because it was too much for me, really. Mm-hmm. But they were all kind of just being silly with me. They're like, you're going to meet your husband tonight, Heather. And like all this. And it's so funny. Whoa. I did. But anyways, they were just,
That's a landmark moment.
That's all for sure a landmark moment.
It was.
That's funny.
It was.
Yeah.
So anyways, I was like, okay, wait, what am I wearing? Oh yeah, I'm wearing my friend's clothes. And then was like, Carlos? And he said, Heather. And I was surprised. He recognized we hadn't seen each other for 5 years.
Right.
So then we start talking there in the doorway, but people are trying to go past. So I figured, I'll go back inside and talk to this guy. And so we start talking, and he asked for my number. But at the time, I was reading a book called I Kissed Dating Goodbye. And I'm like, I'm not going to share my heart with a lot of guys. I'm not going to be giving my number out. I had already decided that. And so I said, I'm not going to give you my number, but I'll give you my email. And so I gave him my email, and we started emailing. And in time, after a lot of prayer, I gave him my number. Even that, I was such a process of praying to make sure, like, because I thought if I give him my number, I'm going to give him my heart, like a piece of my heart. I just knew it. And I thought, I don't know if I want to give him my heart because I have a lot of plans. Like, I had all these things planned out. And I remember going down to the church and praying about whether to give my number to this guy. And one of the days I went to go pray, my pastor's wife, this was in Exeter, and my bishop's wife were there, and they were decorating and putting flowers on the altar and stuff. And they came and sat with me, and they were, so what are you up to, Heather? And I was like, well, I'm just here praying. And they said, have you been talking to any boys? And I'm like, actually, I'm wondering if I should give my number to this guy, but I don't know if I should. And I started they sat and talked with me. And I remember my bishop's wife laughing really gently with me. She's so sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, well, and I said, I just don't know if it's God's will, and I want to stay in God's will. And she said, well, how do you think you're going to be in God's will if you have your whole life planned out? And you have, this year I'm doing this year I'm doing this, and I'm not going to stray away from this. And how are you going to
allow God's will to work?
Yes, that's what she said.
And
I'm like, I don't know. And she goes, sometimes following God's will is like a leaf in the river, and you're just going down the river. And I thought, that's scary.
Yeah.
Like, so anyways, she talked with me for a while, and I was like, okay, I think I'm going to give him my number. And so there's that.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. That, when you said you didn't give him your phone number, but you gave him your email. I thought, knowing Brother Carlos now, like just total
IT
tech,
nerd, yes.
tech able.
Oh, he was totally
email
fine
even
with that.
better. Don't even worry
I know,
about it. That'll work.
So what he said, he's all, that's fine. You didn't want, like in the email, he said, that's fine. I'm happy with just emailing. And I thought, I don't know, for some reason, just the way he was, I was like, oh, I like that.
Because some guys are
awesome.
like, okay, nice meeting you. Bye.
Email, yeah. Well, that's a cool story of how you guys met, and obviously you ended up getting married and
proposed. I think December 2010, and got married June of 2011. Been married 13 years. This June will be 14 years.
Wow.
When we were dating, there was a time where I was going to break up with him. We dated for how long, babe? This is too long. Like 300. 300. I'm sorry.
300 years.
No, 3 years. We dated for 3 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time for a Pentecostal girl,
Yeah.
That's
It was
already
yeah.
2000.
2000.
Anyways.
Around August of 2008. So yeah.
So I had gotten offended with him, and it was when he was going to the other church. I got offended with him, but we went to church and I thought, I'm going to break up with him after church. I don't want to do it before church because I want to do it right before I leave San Diego.
Yeah.
And I was visiting at that time. And I remember in the service, the preacher got up and he said, have you ever done something really stupid and felt bad about it? Like, and Carlos was shaking his head like, yeah, because he knew he had offended me.
Yeah.
And
in the delay.
Yeah. No, not the delay. It was something else.
Oh, okay.
No. Yeah,
And-
a different thing. Okay.
Yeah. And he preached that morning about a mulligan. And I guess in golf, there's something to do with a mulligan.
Yeah.
Like a do-over.
Yeah, you mess up, you get another chance.
Okay.
Essentially.
Yep.
Like
yeah.
you
And
don't
I
hit
think
it
his
good.
message was called mulligan.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll give him another chance. I don't know.
Thank God for mulligans. Yeah.
Thank you, Jesus.
That's awesome. Man. those are some landmark moments right
Yeah.
there.
She was very long suffering.
Yeah.
They say that love is blind and marriage opens your eyes, and that is so true.
Yeah.
Marriage opens your eyes to, your own faults, their faults, and all
Sure.
of that. And so then you need God's continual guidance. You need that counselor
Right.
all the time. Like in the dating, you need God as your counselor. There's so many times. I'm so thankful that we dated in church because we had people in our lives, godly people to help us and to kind of be that when you're dating, you don't see everything. And so it's good to have someone to talk, others to talk to, and to have messages like that you can go off of, and having scripture. And then again in marriage, just he's our continual counselor. I'm always praying, God, counsel me and how to be a wife, counsel, and he's been faithful in that. When we haven't figured out these things through the scripture, we've went to pastor, and he's been an awesome counselor. I'm thankful for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then, did you have anything to add about that, babe?
Definitely learning in marriage is like, don't have high expectations.
Oh, yeah.
Or like when I get married, my wife's gonna do A, B, and C, and I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z.
My wife is gonna cook like my mom. No, she's not.
Right.
Or she's gonna do this, and this while I do this. Yeah.
Like that makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of like the God's will advice that you were given is kind of like let it happen.
It's gonna take time for your wife to learn how to take care of a home and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to take time for your husband to learn how to take care of the yard, because I went into marriage thinking, oh, I'll be inside. I'll go out and help him in the yard. And then
Pastor always says, you think you know someone when you're dating, you're engaged, you're in love, you know them, but you don't know them until you get married.
Right.
Yeah.
You're living with them.
You're blinded by the rose-colored glasses.
Yeah. And you're living with them, and you're getting to know them on another personal, another kind of level. And I think that's really good that you guys note that, because,
That's true. And you know what? You think you know yourself. And then when you get married, you realize there's a lot of things about myself I didn't realize. I didn't realize how selfish I was.
Right.
I thought I was unselfish until I'm having to, give 100% to someone else.
Right.
Because when you're young, you don't give 100% to anybody but yourself.
Right.
And you're giving like 5% here, 10% there.
So good.
And you're not laying down yourself for someone else.
Yeah.
So,
really having to humble yourself.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And I'm still learning that. I'm not saying I'm
sure. Yeah, I was
Totally
just gonna say,
same,
man,
yes.
I need to be better myself, but thank God he's patient, and thank God the marriage is a lifetime commitment.
So now mighty God, as in protection, so many times in this last couple years I've seen God as our mighty protector. And when we got into this house where we're at in El Cajon, we had a lot of like homeless people coming up in our driveway and using our faucet, knocking our trash cans down, and just different things that were like worrisome for me being at home all the time.
Sure.
And my brother-in-law said, you know what, you guys need to have cameras. And we didn't at the time even have internet. We didn't have any of that. And he wanted to buy internet for us. He wanted to buy cameras. He wanted to do all this stuff. And I was feeling like, no, praying about it, it didn't seem like the right thing to have him pay. I'm like, God is going to provide. And I remember one day reading my Bible and was reading about the story of Abraham, and it got to the verse where, or it was the story where after the battle, the king of
with the Battle of Nine Kings,
where the king wanted to give to Abraham, and he said, "Oh
no, lest you say you helped me."
Yes, yeah, and then after he said, "No, I'm not going to take from you," then the Lord shows up and he says, "Abraham, fear not, I am your shield and great reward." And in this decision making of should we get our brother-in-law's help on this. And I was like, I highlighted that in my Bible. I am your shield and great reward. And I told God, I'm going to just trust you. And right when I wrote on the side of my Bible, I'm just going to trust you, there was a knock on my door. And I went to the door, and the neighbor said, "Hi, I don't want to scare you or anything. I just want to let you know that we called the cops because somebody was looking in your room and they were looking in your backyard. So we called the cops right away, and he was going to jump your fence, but we told, hey, we called the cops on you." And then he took off running. And I looked down the street. Sure enough, the cops had this guy. And I was like, wow, I was just trying to make this decision and highlighted in my Bible, I'm your shield and great reward. And here God was showing me, hey, I'm your shield.
Yeah.
And great reward. And after that, I was like, you know what? God is going to bless. I think that we won't have to have help from anyone else in time. We're going to be able to have our own, finances to kind of get the things we need. Sure. And God stepped through, and we were able to pay for the stuff that we needed.
Wow, that's awesome.
We didn't have to borrow it from anybody. And before we were in this house, we were in a house in Spring Valley, and my husband was away at a Bible quizzing trip, and I had my 2 nieces. And that day we had went all day at SeaWorld. My phone was dead. I couldn't get it to hold a charge, and so I needed a new phone or something. But anyways, it was late at night. We were coming home from SeaWorld. He's away at on a Bible quizzing trip, but he's coming home. And I had pulled up in the driveway, and there was a guy on our front porch. And I didn't see him, but my nieces, I was about to get out, and my nieces said, no, don't get out. There's someone on the porch. And I looked, sure enough, there's a guy over there. And he waved something shiny at us. I didn't know what it was. And then he went like he was leaving. He went behind our vehicle and acted like he was leaving. And we were going to get out again. And my niece said, no, he's right here. Like he was right behind the back door of my niece. It was a sliding door, and he was right there.
Wow.
And so I said, don't worry, girls, we're not going to get out here. And so my phone was dead, and I couldn't call anybody. But I remember there was a police station down the street, and I was like, we're going to go down to the police station and tell them that there's someone at our house.
Yeah.
And so I drive down there, and I don't see any doors. I don't know how to get into the police station. It was like one of those where there's no handle. They just come out. I don't know how they got in there. I couldn't find a way to get in.
Yeah.
So I said, girls, we're just going to have to pray that my phone turns on. And I had been trying to charge it on, I had a phone charger, but it wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
And I said, let's just start praying. And so I held up the phone in the middle of all of it. There was 2 of them. So in the middle of 3 of us, and we start praying. And all of a sudden, the phone started beeping up in a circle.
No way.
And I was like, oh, girls, they're crying because they're thinking, like, oh, this is the worst thing, and they're crying, and they open their eyes. And I said, girls, don't you ever forget that was a miracle.
Yeah.
That God stepped in. So the phone turned on. I called Carlos, and he was almost home. And I told him, there's a guy at hanging around our house, and I'm trying to call the police, and just want to let you know. I got off the phone with him, and I called the police, and I gave them my address. They said, we're going to be right out. As soon as I hung up with the police, the phone died.
No way.
It died, even though it was charged in. It died. Yeah. So God turned it on enough for me to make those two phone calls.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, I said, we're not going to go home right away because we want to give the police time to kind of look around. And so I gave it a couple minutes, and then we went back, and there was police looking with their lights. And so we ran in the house, and that night the girls are like, can we sleep in your bed? We're so scared,
Totally.
And but God showed us that he is our mighty protector. Yes. And those are just 2 stories, but
sure,
God's good.
It reminds me when with my family on Saturdays we used to have our prayer and devotional, but anytime we would do a family trip, we would read Psalms 91. And one of the verses is use your shield and buckler. So that is a good psalm of protection.
Sure.
That he's our shield and buckler.
Yes. Yeah. And then as our everlasting Father, I think of him as the giver of life. And that's the story of our little Lorraine, our miracle child.
Yeah.
We, about 6 months after we had gotten married, our minds were not on kids at the time. I was trying to still get a job. So my mind was there. And we had went to this conference where my cousin, who's also a preacher, he had came and prayed over us and the altar and said, you're going to have a child. And at that time, I wasn't even thinking about kids. I was like, like I said, I was thinking about trying to get a job and all that. And I had been working, but I wanted a full-time, a more secure job.
Yeah.
And but when he prayed that, my heart started wanting that. I wanted a child, and we were excited. We're like, wow, we're gonna have a baby. And then a couple months go by, and you're thinking, well, I wonder if that was true, like if that word was really for us, you know. And then a couple years go by, and you're thinking, well, what's going on? And so we were praying, and all our friends are having babies, and we were excited for them. But
and this is because you guys were obviously trying. And
yeah, all of that. But but we were, and our heart was growing in belief. We had the faith in all of that, and so after a couple years, we went to an infertility doctor, and our doctor sat us down in the office, and she said, well, we can try this other method where we're going to put you on hormones, and we can try how do you say it? In vitro
fertilization.
We can try that. But with the hormones, they're controversial because they could cause cancer. And so I'm thinking, I don't know about that. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go home and I'm going to pray about this.
Yeah.
And I remember I couldn't sleep that night. I'm thinking, is this the route really we're supposed to take? I mean, I had already started, it had been years, and I started reading verses, children are a heritage of the Lord, and thinking, but also thinking, okay, that verses like that were painful also.
Sure.
But, hopeful and painful, because you're thinking, okay, why isn't it happening for me, kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
And I remember just crying, and Carlos said, well, let's open our Bible. And so we start reading the scriptures, and we opened it up in Isaiah, and everything was speaking to us. Like it was basically, God was basically yelling at us with these scriptures, because he was saying, not yelling in a mad way, but yelling like so that we could hear him. And it was like, don't you know that I can do this? And
so Isaiah, there is a few verses in Isaiah, like 40, 41, 43, and 45. But the one that spoke out to us, Isaiah 41, 17 through 18. This is the ESV version. When the poor and needy seek water, and there is none, and their tongue is parched with thirst, I, the Lord, will answer them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. I will open rivers on the bare heights and fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water, and the dry land springs of water.
Wow.
Yes, yeah. And so basically God was saying, like, I make the desert places fruitful and
plentiful.
Yeah, I put waters in the desert. And I was like, put my hand on my womb, and I was like, the desert place is fruitful, Lord, my desert body.
Wow.
And this was six years. And I remember there's so many phases when it's that long. You go through phases of, anger, of grief, of faith,
disappointment,
and then also, you know what? Maybe I just need to believe. Take out all of the frustration. Make sure that you're being hopeful. Make sure that you're thinking right. And then you're thinking, you start thinking about what other people might be thinking of you. Yeah. Like, does she have faith? And they're probably not even thinking of you, but you think things like that. And so I remember thinking, well, I'm going to show the Lord that I'm going to believe him for it. So I remember I was teaching, but I left teaching and I was like, I'm going to open a daycare. And so that when my baby comes, I can be at home watching my baby and I could have my daycare. So I did that, opened a business, and then a year goes by and still no baby. And I'm watching other people's kids.
Yeah.
But when they leave crying because I'm watching other people's kids and I want a baby so bad at this time. And I remember there were times where I prayed, God, just let me die because I want a child so bad, and started thinking maybe it's not healthy for me being around other people's kids, even though I never hurt them or anything like that. But
sure.
But just my mental state, it was too
tough.
much. Yeah.
Wow.
And so, really to kind of give you a context, because it's probably hard for a man. I know even Carlos doesn't quite understand it, but as a, like me growing up, even in high school, I would listen to Focus on the Family and Dr. Laura and all these podcasts, and like Dr. Laura, the way the people answer, hi, I'm my kid's mom. Like that's how they identified themselves. She would take calls and they'd say, hi, I'm my kid's mom. And they'd ask advice. Like that was their identity. I'm my kid's mom.
Right.
And it's like being a mom is the best thing. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I couldn't. So I was like, maybe I need to so I closed the daycare. I need to step away from this and do something that has nothing to do with kids. I'm not going to go to teaching. I'm not going to watch kids. I'm not going to do Sunday school. Not going to be around kids. And so I started doing something else that made me miserable. So I remember there came a time where I was at church and one of my friends asked, Heather, how you doing? And I just start crying. And I ran in the bathroom. I was so embarrassed and thought, I don't even want to come to church anymore.
Oh, no.
Because I don't want that to happen again. Like, how are you doing? And I was genuinely happy for my friends, but I was also sad for myself. And I didn't want my friends to see that sadness. And I didn't want them to feel uncomfortable, like sharing their joy with me on things because they're thinking, oh, what is she going to feel?
Poor Heather.
Yeah. And so I didn't want that. And so I was like, I don't want to go to church anymore. I'm just going to live for the Lord at home.
That's tough.
And
That's so tough.
I remember telling God, I'm not going to go to church. I'll read my Bible and I'll stay at home, and knowing that wasn't the right thing. And I was like, okay, Lord, I'll go. Because going to church is more than just, it's going to give of yourself. It's the body, all that stuff. So
yeah.
I was like, Lord, I'll go to church, but you have to talk to me. You have to either tell me you love me. Oh, wait, no, this is how I said it. I said, Lord, I'll go to church, but you have to talk to me. Either shake me and show me the sin that's in my life, because I had been to services where like the preacher would get up and he'll read people's mail kind of thing.
Yeah.
At our church, we haven't seen that, but growing up in church, I had seen that.
Sure.
And so I thought, even if they have to shake me and embarrass me in front of the whole church, I mean, everyone knows I haven't had a baby, and so something must be wrong, right? So I thought, God, just reveal my sin and I'll correct it. So either that or tell me you love me. Because at the time I was thinking, if children are a heritage of the Lord, that's a blessing that he gives. Why is everyone else getting blessed and I'm not?
Yeah.
And I'm like trying to consecrate my life, get rid of anything that would be unclean, like making sure I don't even have house magazines, nothing like that would be idolatry.
Right.
You're trying to cleanse your life and everything.
Yeah.
And so I got ready and I'm like, I'm going to go to church late so that I don't have to talk to anybody. And I'm just going to go in there. And then after altar call, I'm just going to go straight to the car. I won't have to talk to anybody. But I go to church and there was this lady there that didn't know how to speak English. And I had an app on my phone where I could Google Translate. So I was like, okay, I'll talk to her. Just like my heart was going out to her. So I sat with her and I started typing the message, and pastor gets up and it was like a tongues interpretation. It wasn't, but it was that feeling. You know how right before a tongues interpretation, everyone gets quiet because God's about to speak?
Sure, yeah.
It was that kind of thing. I was typing in my phone and all of a sudden I was like, God's about to speak. And I look up and pastor had paused and then he said, God loved Hannah. And I was crying. I was like, oh my gosh. And shaking. And I type it in and he says it again. God loved Hannah. And I was almost going to type it again. And then he said, and God loved Rachel. And those were two barren women. And basically, remember I told God, you have to tell me you love me.
Read my mail.
And he said that they were not barren because they weren't loved, because they were loved. Hannah was the loved one. Rachel was the loved. They were loved by their husbands. They were given, like Hannah was given a double portion, all this, and then he talked that day about how God had a need. And I still don't understand what that need was. The need could just possibly have been for me to go through a season, a wilderness place. Cause there's blessing in that, because in the wilderness, you hear God's voice. You learn to pray about everything.
Yeah.
And it becomes your substance to even keep going. Just hearing a word from God is what's going to keep me going. Yeah. And so, learning to seek after the voice of God, and having that be your go-to every day, just to go. And so, establishing that kind of relationship with God was that landmark. That God loved Hannah was a landmark. Yeah. And there were a lot of landmarks in that season because there was, 6 years there. Sure. But then, so then I'm thinking, oh, wow, okay, God has a purpose. So then I start praying, God, whatever your purpose is, let it go ahead and let it accomplish what it's supposed to. And then still no baby after several years. And we go to this conference, and this guy was praying for all of us in our row with our family. And they pray for my sister. This guy prays for my sister. And it wasn't like that. It was, people were worshiping all over the place. This man that we didn't even know just come and pray for our family. And we're worshiping in our seats. And he goes to each of us, and then he goes to my dad, and he says, oh no, first he prays for my dad, and then he prays for me, and then my sister. Then he goes back to my dad, and he says, you're not going to be a grandpa once, you're going to be a grandpa twice. And so me and Stephanie looked at each other like, oh, maybe we're going to have babies at the same time. This is so exciting. But still no baby, after. And it was still a long time. But then there came a time where at our church, Brother Dominguez was visiting, and he didn't even preach that day. Somebody else preached, but he was praying for people on the altar. He came to me and said, the Holy Ghost told me to come and pray for you. What would you like prayer for? And I said, a baby. I didn't tell him everything, and I'm not saying everything to the story here, but he spoke in that prayer. He spoke directly towards things that I didn't say. And so I knew, wow, this guy, he's talking from the Lord. And even he would say something, and I would think a negative thought, and he would speak to that negative thought. And it was just really incredible. And at the end, he said, he goes, it is finished. It's done. You're healed. And then when we were done praying, he said, by this time next year, you'll be holding your baby.
And that was September 2017.
Yes.
She was born September 2018.
Yeah, wow. Exactly a year.
Nothing is impossible for God.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Nothing is impossible.
That is so powerful.
God's
just the season and the lessons learned in the season and the difficulties and the battles that you have to war in such a season. And wow. Yeah. Can't imagine how tough that is.
Yeah.
Wow. And then and that's when Sister Lorraine or Sister Lori was born.
Lorraine.
Sister Lorraine, little Sister Lorraine. Yeah, that's awesome. And now she's a vibrant, lively little
6,
child,
very,
healthy
very,
as ever.
Social butterfly.
Yeah, totally. Wow.
That's good. And then Prince of Peace. I think about God being our peace in the hardest things. The thing we struggle with at times is finances. And we've seen God come in and help us, and he's been our peace in that. And there were times when we lived in Spring Valley where there came a time where we couldn't afford to pay our monthly bills, and we're thinking, we had already bought at a time when it was low and we were paying a good mortgage price. And we were looking at, okay, maybe we need to sell this and maybe rent somewhere, but we were looking at the rent at places, and it was just as high.
Much.
Yeah. We didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
We were thinking we're going to have to leave San Diego. There's no way to even make it here. And we would just, it seemed like everything we talked about, like we discussed different things and nothing seemed to be like the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
And we would spend hours on the couch just trying to, with, papers, planning out different, okay, what if we did this?
Sure.
What if we did this? Oh, that's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
And not knowing what to do. And one night, this lady, she came to our door, knocked on our door. I mean, this is just so incredible that God would even do this for us.
This is when God uses just random strangers
Yeah.
to speak his word.
And this lady came and knocked on her door, and we didn't recognize her, but she said, I'm your neighbor, and she's shaking. And she goes, God told me to come and tell you that God is in your hands. And she's holding a bag of groceries and a credit card, and she's shaking, holding it. And
Oh,
I'm
my
thinking like
goodness.
she's going to give it to us, but
Yeah.
she didn't. She just walked away holding her bag of groceries in her. And we're thinking, we were just staying. We didn't even give it.
We were just in like shock.
We were in so much shock. I don't even know if we told her, oh, thank you. Or
In anticipation to receive what she
Like,
had, or just for the nice words, for the kind
Yeah.
words.
yeah, for the kind words, like we didn't even respond to what she said. We were just showing shock. She was shaking. Just for her to like even go and do that was probably
Yeah.
super scary.
Sure.
But she said, God is in your hands. And then she left. And then we go and sit down, and I start cooking. And at that time, we couldn't even really afford to make a full meal. We were having a Bible study at our house. We couldn't do a full meal. The other people were bringing food, and we were just warming up cheese.
Yeah.
We were more for nachos.
Nachos,
We were moving
yeah.
cheese. And they were bringing the meat, the chips, and all of that.
Yeah.
And so Carlos goes, maybe she meant we're in God's hands. I was like, yeah, maybe she did. Maybe she was so nervous that she didn't know what she was saying, but maybe she was right. Maybe God is in your hands. Maybe because we had all these decisions and we didn't know what to do. Everything looked scary.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, maybe God is in our hands, like what we put our hand to do. And we are trying to hold on to these things we had committed to the church and just, this lifestyle. And maybe what we put our hand to do, God will bless it. And we just have to have faith.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's how it all played out, because we were not able to afford that place. We sold it. And to make a long story short, we ended up in a house that was bigger than the house in Spring Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And when we sold that house, we made $60,000. Well, after, all the
Fees and
tithing
whatnot.
off
Sure.
of the,
Uh-huh.
and then what we were left over with was $60,000. And we were able to put a down payment on a house and, pay off some bills. And that put us in a different place.
Yeah.
And we weren't seeing it before, but God worked it
Wow.
all out. It was really incredible. Then once we moved in, we opened a drawer, and in the drawer was the price of the house we bought that we're in right now. And they gave it to us. We didn't realize it, but they gave it the first listing price they gave it to us $60,000 less.
Wow.
And that's what we had made on the other. So it was
Yeah.
like, wow.
So God said, no, I'm going to take it off the top of this price,
Yeah.
and give it to you,
Yeah.
and give you the house.
It was such a God thing. It was incredible. And he's our Prince of Peace. When we go through, right now we're going through something financially, and we have that landmark to look back and say,
Sure.
God
Hold
came
on
through.
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's powerful. That's so good. I think that's really I really like how you guys pulled the agenda or outline for today from that scripture, because you can live your life based on, looking back on landmarks from this,
who God is.
Yeah, who God
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. And, I would encourage other people, when you're praying, pray things like pray Isaiah 9:6
Yeah.
and start worshiping God for being these things. And as you'll see, oh my goodness, your God in new ways
Right.
all the time, new ways that he's a counselor,
Yeah.
and new ways that he's a provider. I know provider's not in there, but just start naming who God is and realizing he's that for you. And, we all have testimonies. And one thing I do is I pray, God, give me eyes to see what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and then give me a mouth to be able to share it or to
Yeah.
articulate it
Sure.
in a way that people could understand.
Right.
Because of course it's not like you can change your testimony. What happened, but you, Lord, just help me to be able to share it.
Yeah, share it in a way that is going to be impactful and ultimately like provoke faith.
Provoke faith. Help me to remember the parts.
Yeah.
Remember.
And, and I think as we're prayerful, God will give you the words, and these different landmarks you guys shared today is just, man, I want to hear more.
Yeah.
I want to hear more. Brother Carlos, your turn. Your turn to tell different ones. But no, this has been incredible, and I appreciate you guys coming to sit in and share your guys' landmark moments and what God has done for you. And I'm hopeful and I'm confident this is going to help out, not just the listeners, but the ones that are married and, trying to complete this journey of living for God. And the landmark moments will indeed sustain and help us do that. And thank you guys for coming on. I appreciate it. Any last words?
Just no matter what you're going through, God is in it, even though you don't see it.
Yeah.
He's your comforter. He's your strength. He's your shield and buckler. Mm-hmm. He is your provider.
Amen. Mm-hmm. Amen. Well, I hope everyone who tuned in today was blessed. We appreciate all the support, everyone tuning in. Share the podcast, share this episode with a friend, a family member, someone you know that needs to be encouraged. Thank you again for all the support. And remember, you can subscribe to Landmarks on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Again, thank you so much. And we'll see you on the next one.